In this fourth percentages lesson, we're going to put all of our knowledge into practice and look at some actual exam style questions. This is a familiar style question in exam papers where you'll have to work out just how many children like each of the flavours of crisps. In this question we know that there are 60 children in the class and we know that 50% of them like prawn cocktail crisps. So as we've worked on previously, we know that 50% is a half. So we need to work out half of 60 to establish how many children like prawn cocktail crisps. Half of 60 then, mental math sum will work out that is 30. We now also need to work out 25% of 60. We all know that 25% is 1/4, so we're finding 1/4 of 60. Again, we can do ourselves a little sum. This time we'll write it out. 4 into 60. So 4 into 6 goes once, 2 over 4 into 20 is 5. So we know that 15 people like salt and vinegar crisps, and also, because it's another 25%, 15 like cheese and onion crisps. A final check will confirm that all our sums have been done correctly. So we have 30 children liking prawn cocktail, 15 liking salt and vinegar, 15 liking cheese and onion. If I add those all together, I do finish up with my 60, which is how many children were in the class. 80 children are in a youth club, and here are their favourite games. So 50% of them like Connect 4, 20% like Snakes and Ladders, 15% prefer chess, and 15% like Monopoly. It's a slightly more difficult question, but we'll begin with the easiest of our options. So 50% again we know is a half. So we've got to find a half of 80. Quite an easy sum, so we know 40 people like Connect 4. We're going to move on to the more difficult of the options now. We need to find 15% of 80 to work out how many people like chess and Monopoly, because they're both 15%. First off, we'll find 10% of 80. So that is 1/10 of 80. So we just divide it by 10, so 8. So 10% is 8. It follows then that if 10% is 8, half of that, 5%, is 4. So if we want to get 15%, we have to add them both together to get 12. So we know that 12 people like chess, 12 people like Monopoly. At this point, I could do a subtraction sum to work out how many people like Snakes and Ladders. So we could add 40, 12 and 12 and take that away from 80. But because we know that 20% like Snakes and Ladders, we can jump straight in and do another sum. So 20% is 1/5. So we need to find 1/5 of 80. So we divide 5 into 80. 5 into 8 goes once, 3 over. 5 into 30 goes 6 times. So we know now that 16 people like Snakes and Ladders. Again, to check that all our sums have been done correctly, we add up our totals. So we have 40, 12, 12 and 16. 6, 2, 2 and 0 are 10. 4, 1, 1, 1 and another 1 gives me the 8. So we have 80, 80 matching up. There are 120 children in a football club, and here are their favourite pets. 25% like cats, 25% like fish, 5% voted for hamsters, 5% for birds, and 40% for dogs. In this question, I'm going to jump straight into the most difficult of the options. So we're going to find 5% of 120. Well, to find 5%, it's best to work out 10% and then simply half it. So 10% of 120, we're finding 1/10 of 120, which is 12. So if 10% is 12, half of that would then give me 5% being 6. So 6 people like birds, 6 people like hamsters. Now we're going to move on to doing the next most difficult, the 40%. So we need to work out 40% of 120. Again, we're best by working out 10% and then times that by 4. So 10% of 120 we know is 12. We have 4 10% to make 40, so we times it by 4. 4 2s are 8, 4 1s are 4, so that tells me that 40% of 120 is 48. Now we're left with finding 25% of 120. So 25% of 120. We all know that 25% is 1/4. So we're finding 1/4 of 120. So we have to divide it by 4. 4 into 12 goes 3 times. 4 into 0 is 0. So 30 people like cats, 30 people like fish. Our final step is to check that all of our working out has been done correctly by adding our totals. So we had 30, 30, 48, 6 and 6, and we need this to match up the 120 people. 6 and 6 is 12, plus the 8 is 20, so 0 with a 2 over. 3, 3 and 4 bring me up to 10, and 2 gives me 12. 120, the same as our original number. This exam style question is testing our ability to convert a fraction into a decimal. So if we look at the diagram, we can see that there are 10 pieces. And at a quick count, if you count them up, you know that there are 8 shaded in. So we have to convert 8/10 into a percentage. So 8/10, I'll put it into hundredths first, because remember percent means out of 100. So if I times 10 by 10, I get that 100. So I need to do the same to the top, giving me 80. So 80 100ths, so 80 over 100, 80% of that shape is shaded. This is another familiar question in exam papers. It's checking if we can convert from decimals to fractions to percentages. So we have to complete the table below by filling in the 4 blank boxes. I'm going to begin with the 75%. So 75% into a decimal is 0.75. Even if I wasn't too confident with my converting, all of the middle row is complete for you, so you can always use that as a guideline, and everything we need to know is in there to help us solve the questions either side. So returning to my 0.75, well, that is 3 of the 0.25, so we have the 3 of the fraction, which is 3/4. 0.25 has been doubled to make 0.5, so I have to double the fraction, giving me a half. And an easy one at the very end, 0.5 is 50%. Similar to the last question, we have to complete the table below by putting in a fraction or a percentage in each of the empty boxes. So again, it's just checking to see if we can convert. So 10%, if you think about how many 10s are in 100, well, there's 10 of them. So 10 is 1/10 of it. Next, we look at 25%. How many 25s are in 100? Well, there's 4 of them. So 25 makes up 1 part of that 4. Our next one, well, follows on from the previous. 1/4 is 25. If you have 3 of those, it gives me 75%. And my final one, just half of 100 is 50. Because remember, 100% is the whole thing. The normal price of a scooter is £140. In a sale, it is reduced by 25%. How much would you have to pay for the scooter in the sale? So the scooter was originally £140. It's been reduced by 25%. So there's 25% off. We know that 25% is 1/4. So we need to find 1/4 of 140. So we'll divide 4 into 140. So 4 into 1 does not go. 4 into the 14 goes 3 times with 2 over. 4 into 20 goes 5 times. So 1/4 or 25% equals £35. At this point, a lot of people assume that the question has been answered, and that's obviously why they end up getting it wrong. So 25% we have worked out to be £35, but we still need to take that off the original price. So the scooter was 140. We need to take away the £35. So 0, take away the 5, you cannot do, so we need to do a bit of exchange. 10 take away 5 is 5. 3 take away 3 is 0. 1 take away the 0 is 1. So the new price of the scooter in the sale is £105.